Hello and welcome to the Cinema ATL Podcast. The Cinema ATL Podcast is a weekly-ish podcast that examines the world of entertainment through the lens of local and filmmakers. That would be us, your hosts. I'm Michael D. Friedman, and that is...
Martin Kelly.
And this week, it's that time of year again, Oktoberfest. And even though the big event in Germany is once again canceled due to COVID, we're still celebrating, though, with our top 3 movies about beer or just alcohol in general. But first...
Yes. And one other note on Oktoberfest. We realized that it's not quite October, but the real Oktoberfest does start in September. So it should have been going on right now.
It would be going on right now if it was happening.
That's right.
But much like other things, it got canceled, much like our podcast last week when I was also sick, but not due to COVID, just stomach bug. But anyway, too much information. TMI.
Just leave it as circumstances beyond our control.
Circumstances beyond our control. But yes, anyway, now that we're off the rails, Martin, why don't you tell our listeners how they can help the podcast out besides, making sure I'm not sick. So
sure. Well, you can help us out by listening. And, in studies show when you listen, we stay healthy. So listen more, comment and rate and subscribe on whichever podcast format you're listening to us on. And that is so many. There is so many podcast formats, but let's just highlight the main ones that we think about all the time, which is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Amazon, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and even on YouTube. And there are also more, and iHeartRadio is one. So, be sure.
If you, if you are a podcasting platform and you did not hear us list your name, if you featured us in your, featured podcast, maybe we would mention your name.
We absolutely would.
I'm just saying. Scratch our backs,
That's right.
We'll scratch yours. But yes, we also want to hear from you. You can always tweet us. You can get us at Cinema ATL for the podcast Twitter, or our personal Twitters, which mine is at Clever Transient.
Or hit me up at Marte_Real1.
And don't forget Instagram. We're there at Cinema ATL Podcast, all one word.
Definitely. And then the regular internet, if you want to listen to us on a web-based platform, go to cinemaatl.com. All
right. Well, now that those awkward introductions are out of the way, let's jump on into our top 3.
All right. So we're going to be talking about our top 3 movies about beer or alcohol. And this to review, if you haven't heard our top 3 before, our top 3 are just our opinions. These are lists of movies based on our opinions. We're not trying to use any scientific method. And so these are just our opinions, and they could change at any time.
Yep. And the way this works is we will each list our top 3 out in order from number 3 up to number 1. And then we will discuss why we picked them. And then afterwards, we will also throw in some honorable mentions before we wrap up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, without further ado, Martin, what was your number 3 movie about beer or alcohol?
This sounds like a fun topic, but my top 3 are not actually going to be that fun.
All right.
Except for one. One's going to be very fun. But number 3 is Flight.
All right. Okay. Number 3 for me is Drinking Buddies.
That's a good one. I thought about that one. Number 2 for me is Leaving Las Vegas.
Jeez, Martin, you are bringing room down. I'm going the opposite way. Number 2 for me is Strange Brew.
And that's exactly why I figured I should do something completely different. And so a couple of my drinking films are very dark. But my number 1 is not dark at all, and it is The World's End.
All right. My number 1 is Beer Fest.
Cool,
So I
cool.
went a
And
little bit different direction than you.
you went in a completely different direction, and I kind of anticipated it, which is why I wanted to make my list just a little bit different.
So yeah, so why don't we just start at the bottom and discuss why we picked what we picked? And so number 3 for you was Flight, and actually, I will admit that I have never seen Flight. So, Martin, I won't debate you on anything. So just go ahead and tell us why you picked Flight.
Okay, well, this is kind of kind of good timing for me to mention Flight, because Flight obviously stars Denzel Washington, and it's a movie about a pilot who did a heroic thing, but he was an alcoholic and he was a drinker and
Mm,
was drinking during his heroic act. And so the question of the film is, of course, is he still a hero
right.
despite his flaws, right? And of course, why it's really a good timing is, obviously, there's a brand new trailer out for Denzel's next role, which is going to be Macbeth, which I think could be awesome because one of the Coen brothers is the writer director. But
Interesting.
Flight is just another tour de force performance from Denzel Washington, who is probably, if I had to really, you had to pin me down, he's probably my favorite actor because he's never ever let me down
Right.
in a performance, and this is no different. I mean, here in he's so what I love about Denzel, and then again in this movie, is that he's not afraid to take on a character who's not all that likable. I mean,
Mm,
he's not a good guy,
right.
not a good guy at all, and yet he imbues the character with such humanity that you can really empathize with whatever character he's playing, no matter who it is. You know what I mean? And so, again, the drinking aspect is the fact that this character drinks a lot, a whole lot. He's a functional alcoholic, though, and so I think that's one of the things that fascinates me about. I'm not a huge drinker, honestly, so I never could relate really to this kind of thing.
Right.
And so only through, talking to people who have gone through this experience, or, even like watching movies or reading books about it, do you kind of understand what this disease is. And so he kind of really kind of brings that to the forefront of a functional alcoholic. It's just a fantastic film, set in Atlanta. So some of my favorite people are in the film too, and they have small parts, which is
Hmm.
great. Like Ted Huckabee and E. Roger Mitchell, and so again, like I said, it's just a fantastic film. Anchored by another incredible performance by Denzel Washington. So it is a little bit of a downer because it's about drinking and not beer per se, although plenty of beer involved.
Right. Well, I think it's funny that you bring up it's good timing because a Denzel Washington movie's coming out, but really you could pretty much say that any time of year, right?
Well,
Denzel
yeah,
does a lot of movies.
yeah, I mean, but finally a new one's coming, so
Right.
it feels like it's been a while. But and the fact that the trailer just kind of recently came out, and there's not much to it, but he looks like
Yeah.
he's going to be awesome again. So
I hadn't heard of that one, so I'll have to check out the trailer. But yeah, no, I haven't seen Flight, and I've heard good things about it. I just never got around to seeing it. Maybe I should. Number 3 for me was Drinking Buddies, and this one is a
and this
uh,
this features somebody we like a
yeah, it
lot.
does. I was going to mention that,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, stole my thunder. Um, this one is directed by Joe Swanberg, so you might know him as being one of the you know founding influencers of the mumblecore movement. This one's a little bit
Mhm.
more advanced than a mumblecore movie, but it does take a lot of the elements from it. But the cast in this is terrific. It stars Olivia Wilde, Jake Johnson, Anna Kendrick, and Ron Livingston. And it's basically about two friends, Olivia Wilde and Jake Johnson, who both work at a brewery, and they are basically best best friends at work. The definition of a work wife, work husband, and it's really a layered tale about two good friends who you know are skirting on the edge of being maybe something more, but it may cost them their current relationships. And it's just it's a it's a funny movie. It's very heartfelt. It's very interesting. The script was entirely improvised, which I didn't know until I was doing a little bit of research on this. So I mean, it just shows you what great actors they have in this film. And I love the fact that there are no like good guys and bad guys in this, romantic relationship movie. Even the people that, could typically be portrayed as the, the one breaking up the couple or
Right, right,
whatever are treated, like human beings. And that's what I like about it. And, and it all centers around this brewery. And they're always drinking all the time. I don't think
right,
there's a shot in the movie where somebody's not drinking a beer. So talk about functioning alcoholics.
right, right. Well, it's literally their job in that
Yeah,
case.
yeah. But yeah, so it's a really charming movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a quiet movie, but it's all about the conversations and the relationships between these characters, and they just do a great job. Jake Johnson, I think, in particular, is really great in it, and of course Olivia Wilde is superb as well. And then, as Martin mentioned, there is one of the characters that works at the brewery is Atlanta's own Mike Bruni, who many of you might know from Fakewood Wallpaper. So,
Yeah, absolutely. But I was talking about Anna Kendrick, our buddy Anna
our
Kendrick.
buddy Anna Kinnick, yeah.
But Mike's cool too.
She says she's going to come on the show sometime soon. So,
That's that's what we keep hearing.
a good pal, Anna.
We keep hearing in that little voice.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if that podcast platform, features us, maybe she'll
There
come
we
on.
go.
There you
See that we scratched your back with a guest appearance from Anna Kendrick. See,
go. There you go. But yeah, Martin, you mentioned that you thought this was a good choice. What's your opinions?
definitely no. I love the movie, and for all the same reasons you're talking about. It's really kind of a delicate balance, and these kind of movies can sometimes be heavy handed. I did know
Right.
that it was improvised because I know Joe Swanberg does that quite a bit with all of his movies, but this one just happens to have kind of a more known cast,
Right.
than some of his previous stuff. I mean, some of his previous stuff had people who went on to great things like Greta Gerwig and people like that. But
Right.
this cast was really terrific. Jake Johnson, I think, is perfect for these kind of roles too.
Yeah.
Honestly, he's really underrated. He does a really great job in the movies that he's in. So terrific cast. And again, the fact that it's kind of an understated movie, but it works. It works on that classic indie level
Right.
that we talk about a lot in our some of our discussions about forgotten films. But yeah, I just enjoyed it quite a lot, just like you. And again, a fun film, and everything you said, I agree.
Write it down, ladies and gentlemen. Everything I say, Martin agrees.
Again, the top three is our. Who knows? I may change my opinion tomorrow about that point too.
All right. Okay, so it was your number 2.
My number 2 is another Sunny film called
Yeah.
Leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah,
And
before
again,
you jump into this, I'm just going to say that I don't have much to say about this one either. I did see it. I saw it a long time ago, but I do remember being very depressed after watching it. But go ahead.
as you should be, and again, what I did with this, and I knew it was supposed to be about beer, kind of, or drinking. We said we agreed it could be about drinking and other alcohol. So I said I just had to say, well, what are the best films about this subject? And so
Right.
one of the best films, despite it being, like you mentioned, very depressing, is Leaving Las Vegas. And again, this is all down to the performances of Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue, who anchor this film with this really strong performances from both of them. This was
Nicolas Cage won an
Nicholas.
Oscar for this, right?
He
Is
did.
this the one
He
he
did.
won? Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, and again, and this is a one you mentioned drinking buddies being sort of totally improvised. This I don't think was totally improvised, but the director was a very improvisational director, and he also was a huge jazz head, basically.
Yeah.
And so the score was all jazz, was all sort of just jazz and lounge jazz, though, you know what I mean? And it really adds to the mood of the film. And again, it examines alcoholism and depression. and the main character suffers from both. And the premise of the film, I don't think I'm giving away anything. This film's been out for many years. Is that Nicolas Cage decides to drink himself to death, and so he goes on a month long binge of trying to consume enough alcohol to kill himself because he's alcoholic. And so the one thing that he kind of substitute, the one thing that he actually can derive pleasure from is alcohol. And so he decides to kill himself with that thing because it ruined his life otherwise. But
Right.
he does have that connection to it enough to alter his mood just enough. And so it's really fascinating. And of course, there's a lot more to the film than that, and the bond that forms between Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue is the heart of the film. And again, but the film is about alcoholism and drinking, and so that's why it's on this list, because it's a fine film. And so it just happens to be my top three. Next week my top three could be all comedies, because I may be in a different mood for that. But this was just the best films about the subject matter.
Right. Yeah, I went a totally different route and didn't do best. Best was not really in my vocabulary when I picked my films. It was just the ones that I like.
Right. No, and it's all fair. And I kind of felt like I knew you were going to go that direction, so I just wanted to not
You
for
wanted
us
to
to
bring
both
everybody
have.
down. That's what you
No,
wanted
no.
to
I just wanted it to be a little bit different.
do. Yeah, no, I like I said, I can't really talk much about Leaving Las Vegas because it's been so long since I've seen it, but I do remember it was a very good movie. It's very depressing though. um,
Honestly, I've never seen it. I've never seen it since.
you've never
I've
seen
seen.
it? You just
I
added it to the list.
No, I have. I have never seen it since that first time.
Right.
I did
It
watch
just
like
stuck with
half.
you.
I watched half of it recently, honestly,
Right.
but I didn't watch the whole thing. But yeah, it did stick with me that much, because it was very powerful.
All right. Well, number 2 for me is completely opposite direction. We're going to go with Strange Brew. And if you guys don't know about Strange Brew, it's from 1983. So it's a little bit older movie. So some of our younger listeners might not have heard of this film. It's a movie about Bob and Doug McKenzie, who are played by Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas. And these are characters that were popular on the show SCTV, which is kind of like Canada's version of Saturday Night Live a little bit. A lot of big actors, comedic actors came out of SCTV, including Eugene Levy,
Right.
amongst others. But anyways, this was Rick Moranis, Dave Thomas play these two brothers who basically have a call-in show where they give advice about just Canadian annoyances and beer and donuts and just
Yes.
like meandering thoughts about these things. And they decided to give them a feature-length film. And the story behind this is that they get jobs at this brewery called Elsinore Brewery, which, yes, it's loosely based off of Hamlet, so if you're wondering where that name comes from. But when they're there, they stumble upon a scheme by the brewmaster to put mind control chemicals in the beer so that he can have world domination.
Of course.
And
Of course.
the brewmaster Smith, is actually played by Max von Sydow, which is just brilliant casting. It's so great. And he's hilarious in this. You wouldn't think of Max von Sydow being a hilarious character, but the way he plays him is like this evil, ruthless villain who's a brewmaster and dealing with these idiots that are basically buffooning their way to ruining his plans for world domination. It's just hysterical. And the movie's just incredibly funny and goofy, and it feels like a Saturday Night Live like type movie, where they base it off of characters, and it's just like series of like really funny skits strung together into a film. It's just really goofy, insane. It's got a scene where hockey players fight off against each other wearing stormtrooper armor.
Right.
And just you have to be a fan of Bob and Doug McKenzie, and the way they talk with a Canadian, just like
I know,
catchphrases and all that stuff. Yeah, take off, you loser! All that stuff. It's just so funny. to see them and this like big screen adventure. And one of the funniest things is actually the very beginning of the movie is kind of a fake out. It's like a fake like intro to the movie where they actually are screening a movie that the characters themselves produced, like called like I can't remember what it's called, like Mutants from 2051 AD or something like that. And it's like so poorly produced and really bad, and like it turns out that like then they pan out and they're actually in the theater watching the premiere with a bunch of people who are like want their money back because it's so poorly made, and that just kind of kicks off the film, and just hilarity ensues, lots of beer humor.
Yeah, totally. I remember it. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in so many years, but I remember how funny it was. And like you mentioned, this is a precursor to like yeah, a Bill and Ted, maybe even,
Right.
and but even more than that, Wayne's World,
Wayne's World, yeah.
owes a lot to this. You know what I mean? And obviously, Mike Myers is Canadian, so I'm sure
Right.
this had to be some kind of an influence on him because they're very similar. The premises of the original sketches, right? Now,
Right. Right.
obviously,
Right.
but then what Michael Myers did with that was really impressive, just like what these guys did with this little sketch, and put it into a movie that's just crazy but really fun. Like you mentioned, it's a very fun movie. So I think I remember it very fondly for sure. But it does owe a lot to. In fact, why I say Bill and Ted is because the Max von Sydow character is funny like death is funny in Bill and
Right.
Ted.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's
Right.
it's that kind of thing, kind of this odd juxtaposition of somebody so serious, yet could be funny, So yeah, definitely a good choice.
Yeah, I watched it. I did watch it like I watched it like during like the beginning stages of the pandemic. I was doing like this like trying to watch a movie every day
Hmm. Hmm.
thing, and it was one of the movies I watched one time, and it's just as funny now as it was when I originally saw it. And in fact, it's funnier for me now actually because when I originally saw it, it was in the 80s when I was a kid, and I thought it was hysterical then. But now I get some of
You
the
get some,
more adult
yeah,
humor in it,
yeah,
and yeah,
that's cool. But yeah, and Rick Moranis, man, how awesome is Rick
Rick
Moranis?
Moranis
And
is great. He's
he's
so
so
good.
good. Yeah, yeah.
And actually, they wrote and directed the film too, so
Hmm. Hmm.
they did everything on it.
Definitely. And this is not Dave Thomas from Wendy's,
Not the Wendy's Dave Thomas, no.
which would have been even more impressive. But
All
so
right, so we're number ones.
I'll do my number one first because I know you like this one too.
I
My
do,
number
I
one
do.
is
In
the
fact, it's on my
world.
honorable mentions. So
Oh, okay, cool. The World's End, which is of course a British comedy about basically a pub crawl, and it's a group of friends who are taking on a 12 like a 12
12 pub,
12 bar
yeah,
12 pub crawl in the middle of a alien invasion. And of course this is an Edgar Wright film, done with Simon Pegg
Nick
and
Frost,
Nick Frost, and a great collection of
or
Martin Freeman
Martin
is
Freeman,
in it, and
Patty
Patty
Considine.
Considine. Yeah, well, just a fantastic
Right,
cast, of course, which they always put together. But this, to me, is not only a great comedy, and again, this one does fit in. This is beer. This is all
right,
about beer. um, and but it's about a pub crawl trying to catch 12 beers with a group of friends kind of reunited after many years, uh, set against the backdrop of an alien invasion, and hilarity ensues. But this is a great action movie. I mean, there are
right,
so many great action set pieces in this film. I mean, it's we've talked about this before. We're both huge fans of Edgar Wright and his filmmaking, but he really can direct action. I mean,
right,
in this film is ludicrous how good the action is for a movie that is seems to be this silly, but it's awesome. It's awesome. Some action pieces in it.
right. And this is considered the third film in the Cornetto trilogy,
Yes.
from
Hmm.
Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost, like their collaborations together after Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And if you like those, and if you haven't seen this, this is very much in the same vein as those movies. It's got the
I
same frenetic pace. It's got the same
yes.
jokes. It's got the same action, the editing. It is a really great movie. It didn't make my top three, just barely got edged out of my top three. I think just because the ending to me is a little weak comparatively to the other films.
It's yeah, maybe. I actually kind of think, I think it's still on par with those two, which are classics. I mean, and people know those two more than they know this one, I think.
Yeah,
But in my opinion, this one doesn't fall far off the pace. It's fantastic. But you're right. I mean, there's a little bit of a you know a different ending that doesn't sort of pay off as well as some of the other endings.
I would say like if you went 4/5 of this movie is brilliant,
Yeah, absolutely,
and then
absolutely.
the last fifth is not as it doesn't ruin the movie. It just it just kind of bogs down after a while, but it doesn't keep the same pace that it has at the beginning. To
Right.
me, that's
Right.
my only flaw of this film. But I totally agree with you. I wanted to put it in my top three, but I couldn't justify dropping the other three.
Speaking of other three, in your next one, unless you got more to say about this one.
No, yeah, I do want to encourage people to check it out, especially if you like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. You will enjoy it. But yeah, my number one is Beer Fest, and I know this is not a good movie, but it makes me laugh so hard every time I see it, and it just may be because I enjoy the Broken Lizard comedy
Right.
troupe. Like
Yep. Yep.
Super Troopers is one of my favorite movies. Beer Fest is like right up there with Super Troopers. I even love Club Dread, which a lot of people didn't like. But this is the third like major
Hmm.
Broken Lizard release to come out there. They had some indie stuff before this, but this is like the third major one that they had, and it basically tells the story of a ragtag group of friends who have to enter a underground beer drinking competition to retain the rights to their grandfather's beer recipe. And it's as ludicrous as it sounds. It's so much fun. It's like high stakes. Like you see them playing beer pong and flip cup and things like that. Are being played for like life and death stakes in this underground tournament that they get into, and all these different countries of the world are represented, and it's hysterical seeing the different countries. And then like their main opponents are these Germans, and they're just such a stereotypical German caricatures, but they're so funny. They're led by Will Forte. Who puts on just a hysterical performance. And then also like the main bad guy is Jurgen Prochnow, who
Yeah.
many people might know as the sub captain from Das Boot, which is again kind of like Max von Sydow. Putting him in a movie like this is just kind of brilliant casting.
Yeah, because he's always a heavy. Like even his other
Yeah.
films, he's always a heavy for sure.
Yeah, and in fact, he mentions at one point that he doesn't like feeling contained and being in contained spaces because he feels like something bad's happening. um, and then there's other like great like cameos. There's like Cloris Leachman plays their great Gam Gam, and she's just like incredibly raunchy and crude, and some of the stuff she says is just so like crazy and out there. Um, this is like if Strange Brew was like really rude and sophomoric. This would be what would become Beer Fest. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's just it's nothing like there's nothing like about this movie that would scream like, oh, this is a good movie, but it's just so much fun. And I just laugh my ass off every time I see it. And I just, I think the Broken Lizard Troupe has great chemistry together and the way they work off of each other. And it's just like immensely quotable, the whole movie. Um, I don't know. I can't really say like why it reaches my top one. Just the fact that it's just extremely funny to me.
Well, it didn't make my list because I've never seen it.
You've never seen it?
I've never seen it.
Oh my
I
god!
is one I thought about seeing. Of course, I'm not as big a fan of Broken Lizard as you, but I
Right,
do, I do like them. I think they're funny. I think they are pretty funny. But I just didn't see it when it came out, and so
right.
it's been on cable before, but I've never really caught it. I've seen like a couple scenes here and there, but never seen the whole film. So, um, so it didn't have a chance to be on my list.
Well, I suggest you see it, and don't go in expecting it to be, leaving Las Vegas level of a movie, but
Okay.
you will. I think you'll laugh at it, um,
Well,
especially
next.
especially if you like Super Troopers. It's definitely more along the lines of Super Troopers than it is like Club Dread.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know those guys are funny. It's just like for whatever reason, since I didn't see it when it first came out, it just is one of those I'd never like felt the need to catch up with, and so I'll catch it. I'll catch it at some point.
I may be swayed by the fact that I saw this movie. I saw they were doing like a tour before it came out in theaters, and they came and screened it at
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
the Midtown Art Cinema,
Right.
and they were all there. We were
Wow.
watching the film, and they like spliced the film together wrong, so we missed the second reel of it. So they stopped the film, like it just like jumped ahead, like all of a
Oh my
sudden,
gosh,
and
that's
everybody's like,
funny.
"What the heck's going on?" And then they like so there was a delay, and they did like a mini Q&A in the middle, and they respun the film, and we watched the end of it, and then there was a like after party, and they were there, and it was just like a great time. But so I might be maybe swayed slightly by that experience, but after
Well,
that, I'd like actually when it came out in theaters, I probably went to see this in the theaters like 3 times. So
oh my goodness,
yeah.
I got to see it then. If you did that, I definitely got to see
Well, I made up for the lack of ticket sales from you. So
it. Yes, you did. Good job. Good job on that. Well,
all right.
cool.
So that's our top. Let's list our top three again before we
Mhm.
jump into our honorable mentions. My top three were number three, Drinking Buddies, number two, Strange Brew, and number one, Beer Fest.
And my top three are number three, Flight, number two, Leaving Las Vegas, and number one, The World's End.
Awesome. So what do you guys think? Let us know what your favorites are, and post it on Facebook or respond to this on Twitter or wherever you want to comment. We would appreciate the feedback. But before we wrap up, honorable mentions. So yeah, I had World's End as, of course, a very close like 3B for me. I definitely wanted to add it, but I just couldn't do it. I also had The Hangover, which
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
me
that
is a really funny
almost.
movie, but it's not as much about drinking. It's about being
Right.
the after effects of the drinking, right?
Well,
So
and they were actually technically drugged.
they were drugged, but they were drinking and drugged.
They
But
were drink. Yeah, true. True. The Hangover itself is a reference to drinking,
right,
but technically they were drugged, and so this was
right.
close for me too. But
And
I
then
kind of
another,
go ahead.
sorry, and then another one I felt skirted the outside of this. It's a great movie, and it would be my number one if I felt it really qualified. But The Big Lebowski, I saw it on a lot of, like, when I was trying to figure out some beer
Right, right,
movies.
right.
I saw it on a lot of people's lists, and I was like, I just don't really consider that a beer
Is
movie.
is it a weed movie more so?
I
I
mean,
mean,
he does drink White Russians. So
yeah,
if you're thinking about the alcohols, but it's not really, yeah, but it doesn't really play an integral role
yeah. I
in
mean,
the film to me.
he drinks, but I mean, I think he's more of a pothead.
Yeah, he drinks all the time,
Yeah,
but I don't think either of those really contribute
and
to
true.
the.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
they add to his character, but they don't really.
Right.
The plot does not revolve around it, so that's
True.
why I didn't feel like it qualified. So
True.
if you're questioning my choices, that's why I did not put it there.
Right. No, and that was one that floated on consideration, but definitely didn't put it in the Hangover the same way. But my honorable mentions are kind of a little off too. But one is Dazed and Confused, and the reason it
Right?
qualifies is because of the big beer bust.
Yeah. There's a lot of beer drinking.
There's a lot of beer drinking and weed smoking in that one too,
Right.
but lots of beer, especially because it's integral to some of the plot. Because
Right.
the whole beer bus has to happen in the woods because
Right.
of a major plot point in the beginning. But that's a cool movie, regardless. And then the other one is more of a drinking movie, and again, it's just the backdrop for a more human drama, and it's Sideways, and it's about wine drinking
Right.
and wine connoisseurs. So, it's a good movie for sure,
Sideways is a fun movie. Yeah.
but it's about drinking, but it's not about beer. So it kind of kept it off. And
Yeah.
the other two that I have on my list are not directly about beer, but there's plenty of beer involved.
Right. Yeah. One just popped into my head that neither of us mentioned, but Superbad could be a good one too.
True, Superbad. Yeah, could have been for sure. For sure.
Although
Absolutely.
it's more about them trying to get beer than it is about drinking.
Right. It certainly qualifies as much as any of some of these other ones too that we're talking about. But for some reason I kind of kept it to the side of my list as well.
Well, all right. I guess that wraps it up for this week. Before we go, I want to remind you again to please share this podcast and let other people know about it. We also want to thank Eureka Failure for always providing us the music. I know that they were working on new stuff, so hopefully we'll have some stuff to share with you in the near future from them. And besides that, Martin, what are your final words of wisdom?
Well, everybody, I want you to think about this. You can't go back and change your beginning, but you can start where you are and change your end. So it's never too late.
Yep. It's too late, never too late. You can change your selections now, Martin, on your top 3.
Exactly. So let's re-up. Okay.
That's it for this week. Hopefully we'll be back next week. I know we've been a little spotty recently, but things happen. And otherwise we'll continue to be your weekly-ish podcast in the meantime. All right, we'll talk to you next week, hopefully.